Today we are in conversation with Rajesh Goel, who heads Honda in India. He's really in charge of all that's happening in the market. It's been a pretty tough time for Honda as well as the entire auto industry. But I think what the company is looking forward to, as well as what a lot of customers are looking forward to, is the new city. Now, the city has been the backbone of Honda for more than 20 years. So, Rajasthan, let's just jump into that new city. It was launched in Thailand. It's due to come here. I think it was coming in April. Then the lockdown threw everything for a toss. So, if you can just share with us what are the plans for the new city in terms of production, rollout, launch, pricing, all that. When can we expect it?
Okay, so good afternoon, Hormazd. Good afternoon, viewers. And it's a pleasure to be here talking to Hormazd about various things at such unprecedented times. Before I start, I wish all our viewers that they remain healthy, safe, and practice all the norms which are required, especially social distancing.
Thank you.
About the city, fancy that you asked me, but before that, I like your beer, the salt and pepper. We are meeting after a long time. Seems
It's a
nice.
Corona look.
Yeah, yeah, the Corona look. So, the city fancy that you asked me because it is, I think, you people who did the, I don't know what word to use when the launch in Thailand happened. And so you released all the information, and therefore I have hardly anything to say. I should actually be complaining as to why you do those things before we officially announce it. But, jokes apart, I think before the lockdown happened, as you would know, as part of media, we were in touch with the media to get into a media test drive, which would have been followed by the official launch in a few weeks, which is the normal pattern that most car makers, most launches follow.
Right.
However, this we had to call off the media test drive just one day before the lockdown happened, and as a result of which, now we have to look at fresh dates post the opening of the lockdown. It has had two kinds of impacts. Obviously, one is that whatever period the lockdown has happened, that period it has moved either which way, the launch. The second is that, as you would know, and we will discuss this as we go along, the COVID impact. So even when the production starts, it is not going to be starting at the same pace as what we were producing earlier. You start at a lower pace at 20-25%, then you stabilize those processes because all processes have had to be reanalyzed, rewritten in order to meet the norms as prescribed by the government. And then you ramp up. So you need an X number of cars that need to reach dealerships so that, after the launch, customers have the luxury, the privilege to be able to go to a dealership, look at a demo, look at a display car, have a test drive, and then start buying a car. So we are still trying to fix the exact date, but if I can use the word, I would like it to be as round the corner as is possible. In terms of City as a brand, I think you know it better than me, and we thank you very much. You've been covering City right from the first generation. I think City is possibly equivalent to or a bigger brand than Honda in India. I think Honda is synonymous with the City, and it's an extremely desirable premium brand. And with the new city, I think we intend to take that one notch higher, uh, as has been covered by your team during the Thailand launch. Uh, I wish I was able to share many more details with you, but then you would not leave me anything to share at the launch timing. But what I would definitely like to say is that it is definitely getting bigger. The size is equivalent to the size of the old Civic that we used to have. So in that sense, it will give the feeling of being much more premium and a much greater status to be seen in one, in keeping with its brand traits. And I think it has simple, straight styling cues which are very, very contemporary. I think it'll be a pleasure for people to own and drive. And the balance I leave for the viewers at the launch timing to, with some mystery for people to unravel as they see the car. But it'll definitely have many new features and other things.
So when you say the launch is around the corner, I mean, are you not committing to a date because that date is still fluid and not fixed, and quite frankly, not even in your control to a certain extent? But let's say if just a best case situation, I guess, would be sometime in mid-June, one would assume. Best case situation, or but I don't want to pin you to it, but just to try and understand people's expectations.
Okay, so here, Hormuz, if you would allow me, I would have to move away from the topic of the city and to into the recovery from the COVID situation. I think you would know it, and I think almost of our viewers would also understand the recovery from the COVID is or getting production back on track post COVID lockdown opening up is essentially dependent on three things. So you have on the supply side, you have the supply chain. On our own manufacturing side, you need the people, our manufacturing associates, to be back to be producing the car in our plant. And on the demand side, you need the network or the dealer network to be back in operation to start selling those cars. As far as the dealer network is concerned, that is directly under my operation, and therefore, as we talk, I think more than 200 showrooms have already opened. More than I think 220 to 30 service facilities are already open, and we are ramping them on a daily basis. So if I go by number of outlets, I think we already crossed 65% of our outlets opening up already across India. That brings me now to the supply chain and the manpower thing. So in terms of supply chain, fortunately, as we stand today, the entire supply chain has permission to open up, or they're in the application receiving permission phase. And beyond that, then we will have to start monitoring supplier by supplier as to if there are supply issues from their plant to our plant, which is what we are monitoring on a daily basis. In terms of manpower, you see, we have the larger plant is at Tapukara, where we had permission from local authorities, and plus it was in the green zone. As a result of which, we had permission to start production right from the lockdown two timing. And we are already producing some engine components and the transmissions there. But to be able to produce the car, we need a little more manpower. And since we were tracking all our associates, irrespective of where they are in terms of what category of area they are in, whether it's a green zone, it's an orange zone, or a red zone, and we had made our strategy accordingly. So depending on the restrictions easing now as we see, I think we will be able to get a lot more people in from the neighboring areas like Rewari, Daruheda, etc. And basis that we'll fix an exact date for start of production of cars. And once that happens, basis that, to fix the date of the launch should not be that very difficult. But like I said, when times are difficult, I think one big responsibility of every manufacturer is to excite the market. And the best thing to excite the market is a new product. So we are committed to do it as early as possible, depending on how quickly we are ramp up to reach cars to dealerships. So that is what the
Right.
current status is.
So, you talked about getting people in factories and all. Is the migrant worker crisis a big issue? I mean, are you fearful that, they just be difficult to get people to actually the workforce to come and make cars? I mean, obviously there's a lot of, I'm sure, contract labor and stuff like that, which in these times, may not be around. So, do you see this problem persisting, meaning going on for a couple of months before you can really be humming as not as usual?
So you see, I'm not really sure whether in my issue, I would like to equate it to I don't like the word migrant labor crisis in the first place, so my apologies. But my understanding is that, we right from the beginning, we have been in touch with all our associates, including people on the manufacturing side. And like I said, we have been categorizing them. So we were always aware where their location is. It is not as if that they have left later on or something. So the issue only is depending on modes of transport and cross-border movement opening up, people, I believe, will start moving back. So, for example, people who are around us came in immediately the moment the lockdown 2 happened, and we got a permission for Tapukara. We did sanitization, we did a lot of equipment checks, etc., etc. Accordingly, people who are at slightly different locations, they need to have some liberty to be able to move, and I'm sure they'll all come back. Is what we have a plan, and once that starts happening, we'll start putting it into action and see the actual situation on the ground.
Right. And again, sorry, diving back to the city, you talked about the current city being more premium. Obviously, we've seen it also. It's a new generation. It obviously gets better than the older one. But what's really interesting, and this is the first time Honda has done it, you are continuing with the current city, or the fourth generation city, so to speak. What's the logic or rationale behind this? It's a very unique thing for Honda to do. Normally, Honda doesn't do this. In fact, they've been so fast in life cycle turnaround. It's normally 5, 6 years, and bang, you've got the next model on a consistent basis. But this time, you're keeping the old city running. So just want to know, are you looking at a different segment, a different market, trying to fill a gap between the Amaze and the all new city? And obviously you all don't normally put your cars into the fleet segment, but that also could be a possibility.
So you are right. You are absolutely right. You see, I think we've discussed this on various occasions. So City as a brand has had a very high desirability quotient in India, right from the first generation. And I think at every subsequent generation change, we have had huge requests or complaints from customers, loyalists, as to why are you discontinuing this? Now, as a car maker, if I were to take one step back and look at the reasons as to why we do it, uh, I think for any car maker, a model change essentially fulfills two big criteria. Number one is, with model changes, when you have a full model change, you're changing the entire technology, including engine, including various other technologies which go into making the car, and therefore you are keeping your model in time with the regulations as they are changing, is one. And second is you need to keep the styling contemporary to keep exciting the customer, right? So, as you would know, the current or fourth generation city has been certified for BS6, and all the other regulations as are prevalent today or will be prevalent after some time are all being met by the current or the fourth generation of city. So, in that sense, regulation wise, it qualifies. In terms of styling, I have always felt, and this is the feedback that we got, that the styling of the city, although it is 5 years past, is still so fresh. It is still so in tune with what the customer desires even today. That even if you were to compare it with some of the newer models launched, the competing models, I don't think it has anything that is left asking for or left wanting. And in that sense, fulfilling these two criteria, I thought we decided it's a good idea to be able to offer a wider range of choice to customers across the price and feature spectrum. Of course, having said that, there are two things I would like to categorically state or clarify. Number one is the decision to do this is not intended to target or look at fleet sales. City has a, like I mentioned right in the beginning, is a brand which is a premium brand in the minds of the loyalist, and also it's a highly desirable brand. So I would not like to target the fleets with it. Number one. Number two is when I say targeting a wider band of customers, I definitely do not intend to start stripping down the city and start launching it. It'll still be fully or fairly loaded, irrespective of what the positioning is. And so, but overall, between the fourth generation city and the fifth generation city running parallelly, there's a higher amount of choice which is available to our customer set.
Right. And just to understand the engine options also, will the old city also be getting the diesel? Because, and then I want to lead into diesel, which is quite interesting. You are one of the few manufacturers who've gone ahead into BS6 with the diesel. Well, there are some, but one would imagine you all wouldn't, because 80% of your sales are petrol. So the question is two questions. One is, will the current city or the fourth generation city continue to get the diesel, or is that reserved only for the all new one? And going diesel with the 1.5 when you have such a small market share, what was the thinking behind that? Because there is an investment to upgrade from BS4 to BS6, and you do need certain volume for that.
Okay, so I think rightly put, you've asked me two questions, and I'll try and address them one by one. In terms of the city, the new city, the fifth generation city, will have both the powertrains, petrol or gasoline, and as well as the diesel, the ID tech. However, the fourth generation that we are running parallelly, we are running only the petrol version. Having said that, I think we as a manufacturer had decided pretty early on, in spite of the investments and expenses involved, that we intend to continue with the diesel for some time. The reason is, I think there's been a huge amount of debate in various articles and various interviews about the cost differential, the price differential, etc., etc. And ultimately, diesel, as you know, in India is essentially about two things. One is for people who want to experience the sheer exhilaration or the power of the or the
The
torque
talk.
the diesel engine gives you. The other thing is for a very, very rational customer, it's an XYZ equation in terms of the price differential between the petrol, diesel, the price differential between the fuels, and how many kilometers that you do in a year to be able to justify the differential that you're paying on the model. And that differential obviously has gone up because the price differential has gone up. However, having said that, to assume that because BS6 has come in, because diesel powertrains have become more expensive, overnight diesel preferences would go away, I think is slightly being unfair to your customers. Ultimately, customer is the king. They decide what products we should launch to be able to satisfy their needs and desires, and therefore we decide to continue the diesel. Uh, like I said, like you mentioned, I think based on our models, we have different percentages of diesel within our lineup. The highest being in the WRV, for example. So in the WRV, we have something like half and half. I mean, exact figure would be a few percentage points here and there,
Around
but
50%.
half and half, yeah, half and half between petrol and diesel. City also has been fairly high from our perspective, anywhere between 20 to 25%, varying depending on time. But models like Jazz, for example, have had a much lower percentage, and our customers of the Jazz have preferred the petrol version. So the Jazz, for example, would
Will
not
not
start
have a
with a
diesel.
diesel engine. Yeah, but
Right.
the WRV or the Amaze or the City, where we have a reasonable diesel a loyalist customer base, where there we believe going forward we need to keep offering them a diesel, and we will look at further strategies as we see the market developing.
Right. And just sticking to this, talking about the Amaze, obviously it has a diesel, let's say, demand. You even had a very unique CVT, which is quite unique for a diesel. Does that continue, or as part of the product rationalization, that is dropped, or is it put in other models? I mean, what's with the diesel automatic? Is there really a market for that?
So, as far as the City is concerned, like I said, please allow me to announce the
Yeah, we'll
features
wait. We'll wait for
at
the launch.
the time because it's a full model change, and that's exactly how we disclose information. But in terms of Amaze, I think we will continue.
You'll continue with the CVT. Right, great. So obviously the CVT has got a certain pull because it's quite unique. Not many diesel CVTs around, and it's a great CVT also for general city
Thank you.
traffic.
Thank
So
you.
I guess you would continue with that. But just Rajesh, before we kind of go on to something else, I just want to finally just close this topic just to understand. I believe CRV there's no diesel, but Civic there will be a BS6 diesel in time. So just to understand the full diesel range from Honda.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. So CRV again, we do not intend to have a diesel, but Civic, we will continue with the diesel. Civic, of course, the reason also is that there is a customer set in Civic who look at the exhilaration of driving a manual, and with the diesel we have a manual which is available. So that need fulfillment also happens with the Civic diesel.
Right. And, Rajesh, moving to this whole digital sales kind of scenario, which everyone's jumping on clearly because, that's the only thing you can do right now with showrooms being shuttered. You can't travel. Everyone's at home. Do you think it's going to be the new norm? I mean, people are, sort of coming to terms or actually enjoying the fact that there's so much you can do digitally on a screen rather than take the effort and risk in the short term with the pandemic still around to go and kind of check out a car. Do you see even for something like a City, an all new car like a City, that people would, do most of their research digitally and then they decide to buy digitally after a digital process and then only take a test drive and book it? Or do you think with newer cars, there's a little bit more touch and feel people want because it's not on the road, your neighbor doesn't have it, that sort of thing?
Okay, so if you allow me to kind of split this discussion into two or three smaller discussions. So one is the discussion of whether the customer fancies buying a car online or digitally, like we have the e-tailing, which happens for all kinds of consumer goods, including clothing and food items and everything. Second is how much of that has grown in terms of for automobile or car sales, and third is how is COVID impacting it. So in terms of cars, I think you mentioned the word digitally savvy. I think so. I don't remember the research and I don't remember the exact data, but I think my faint memory tells me that one of the consulting firms had presented a data where they said that roughly 60% of the customers, when they walk into the showroom, they are more aware about the product that they intend to buy than the sales consultant, which is embarrassing for me to state on this
Right,
interview. But the bigger point is they are still online researching that product even when they're inside the showroom.
right.
So, in terms of researching, in terms of generating an inquiry, and in terms of trying to compare various things, I think digital is a great platform. However, we need to understand that a car or an automobile is very different from a very with extremely expensive consumer good or a piece of clothing or shoe, in the sense that the ticket size is huge.
It's a big
And
investment.
yeah, and second is, because the ticket size is huge, it is bought also based on relationship. So, you try and go and establish a relationship with the consultant, and that comfort comes to you depending on what he tells you, irrespective of whatever you've researched on the net. And because you need to keep going back, and the relationship with the car or the customer and the dealership start from the sale, it doesn't end with the sale, which is the very unique thing, and that's where you start building it on. So I think in that sense, if we are thinking that online is going to replace dealerships, I would not agree. However, in terms of being a lead generation and in terms of supplementing what dealerships are doing, and also in some senses as a system taking care of some shortcomings which no matter how hard car makers or dealer owners try, they still happen. That experience can be provided by online. And as you would have read, we have also started what is called Honda from Home, where a customer from the convenience of his or her house or office, or even as they're moving around, they are able to book a Honda online, and basis their booking, a dealer will get in touch with them for them to be able to take the transaction forward. Coming to COVID, I think it has accelerated the process in the sense that, as you and I have experienced, there is still a set of customers who uh, are slightly apprehensive about getting into a dealership where they would need to touch things and do various things. And therefore, an online platform where he, without having to get into the dealership, he is able to research, book, and then the dealership is able to send the car to his house for test drive, etc., etc., is definitely an increased convenience to the customer. I would not have numbers to mention right now, but one thing I can tell you is the biggest learning for me from this Honda from Home is that we are getting bookings from there from tier 2, tier 3 towns as well, which was the most interesting learning for me.
Right,
One is to look at the numbers, the traction, but you normally assume that the tech savvy customers are in the tier one or maybe some
the metros, of course.
bigger
Yeah.
tier two towns. But we are getting bookings from tier two, lower tier two or tier three level of towns also, which is a huge learning for me as after launching the Honda from Home.
Right, right. Interesting. So, but I think, as you rightly said, touch and feel is still very, very important here. So, yeah. Lastly, Rajesh, I just want to touch upon the future. Being very honest, we've not seen too much action from Honda as far as an aggression goes, like some of your competitors in multiple powertrains, multiple segments, CBUs, whatever. I mean, this has been, to be honest, some half-hearted kind of approaches, whether it's with Accord, even to be honest with CRV, really not big volumes over there. Your pillars continue to be WRV, City, and Amaze. But there are huge model gaps. Your scale is quite small still, which is, I think, going to be an issue going forward if the market contracts. What is the future for Honda over here in terms of building a sustainable business? The only way I can see it is you need to have exports. I mean, it's a scale business because that's what this industry needs. Or you are looking at newer segments. I want to specifically address SUVs because you've been conspicuously absent from there with the BRV going, nothing replaced. HRV also on the cards, not been there. And really, the only one you have is a WRV, which is a quasi SUV, and then you've got the CRV. And it means looks like you're really missing out on a very important segment. So it's a lot of questions in one. I hope you've got all that. But the whole thing boils around, the future.
Okay, so here again, so first thing is the proof of eating is in the pudding. In terms of our presence, our sustainability, our future in the country, I would strongly urge you to look at our presence in the country in terms of two-wheelers and power products where the start was much earlier. And of course, times were different. It took us a lot of time and we grew scale there. So I am not saying that again with four wheelers also we are looking at those levels of volumes. However, we have a philosophy as Honda, and I have experienced various countries, fortunately, in my stay at Honda. And I have not come across any country or any person Honda associate in a country where we say that it's a stated objective that I'd like to be number one here. There's some countries where we are number one, but that's the result. We our R&D works in a very specific way where they try and figure out a need of a particular customer or customer set, and we develop a product to satisfy that need. And basis that we decide what kind of numbers we want to satisfy.
But to be honest, an SUV is a huge need
Yes.
which hasn't
Yes.
been addressed.
Yes, so I'm coming to that, and that's I without feeling, I mean, with some sense of embarrassment, if I can say, I think our president Gaku Nakanishi has said on multiple occasions that we have a full sedan lineup now, but we have gaps in our SUV lineup. I think in the SUV lineup, yes, we are not the fastest of the block, but we would not like to get into a situation where we get into multiple SUVs and then try to keep figuring out what is happening. But the interesting thing of the SUV market in India, as you would have noticed, is the sedan and hatchback market has kind of developed basis the excise duty or GST guidelines in terms of length of the car and the engine size. Whereas SUV, beyond a certain size, is all everybody is trying to find their own niche in terms of plus minus 20 mm or plus minus 30 mm, what width being wider or the height being lower and so on and so forth. So we are still grappling. I think, of course, I personally would also have been happier if R&D was working faster. But yes, we need to fill that space, and definitely going forward, I wish we are in a position to answer to the needs of the customer as quickly as is possible.
So, I mean, in a short way, I know you won't commit on new product thing, but it's a space that you are actively looking at. I mean, but right now, just to sum up what you're saying, it's a little bit crowded. You need to find a way to differentiate yourselves because, as you said, everyone's in this 4.3 meter, 4.2, 4.3 meter sweet spot, which everyone's diving into. But and I think you all were also considering that with the HRV. I know you never said that originally, so you don't need to officially admit that, but I think we know you pulled the plug on that last minute. So one can assume that it's not an easy space to kind of be to have a profitable product in there, and one needs a lot of differentiation, which you all are studying right now.
Okay, so let me give you a different perspective of this without agreeing or disagreeing with what you're saying. You see, forget the business, forget the how the SUV market in India is developing. Like I said, for me, most important, and I've mentioned this multiple times, which may sound very cliched, that for me it is very, very important to satisfy the needs of customers who are Honda owners or customers who very seriously look at Honda as the only or the brand to own or buy. Having said that, if I were to go by the first category, current Honda owners, I also have a need to give them an option to upgrade to an SUV as and when the need comes or as and when the requirement comes up. So as a result of which, like I said, in my lineup, I definitely have a need to put an SUV there, and we are looking at very, very actively. I wish I could tell you the timeline, but unfortunately, I can't tell you a timeline right now. But hopefully, we should be able to address the customer's needs as quickly as possible.
Right. Rajasthan, you talked about volumes and how, in the two-wheeler space are so strong and you don't want to be number one in India, which is fair enough. Obviously, that's really not the goal right now. The goal is to be profitable. But to be profitable, looking at the fact that you've got two plants, two big plants based on a certain volume. Now, your volume has contracted significantly. I mean, Honda is one of the companies where the volume has contracted significantly. So the issue I'm raising is that do you have sufficient scale? That was the answer on getting the, you need more numbers, one would assume, given the fact that you have so much capacity. and the fact that this is all about economies of scale, and making sure that that's the way you get your margin. So is scale an issue, and would exports at some point be one option to kind of address that issue?
So you see, let me start with exports. So we have been doing a limited number of exports of cars to neighboring countries, including to the African continent, and we intend to increase them in this year. That is a stated intent. But obviously, if you are asking from a viewpoint of making India as an export base, I think it's been stated multiple times, we don't work like that, and that is not an intent. But yes, in terms of being able to utilize the competitiveness of India and being able to give some scale to our operations, yes, from to that limited extent, we are looking at it. In terms of overcapacity, I think in the current situation that we're discussing, the issue is much greater than the SUV, especially after the COVID. I think if you look at all car makers globally, I think globally the car industry is suffering from huge overcapacity. And I think almost every global car maker is looking at similar kind of measures to be able to address those issues. And so are we. So it's not just true for India or true for my company, but I think if you were to pick up any brand in any part of the world, I think you'll find very few who don't fall in this category. So those are measures that we are looking at, and we will try and obviously see how the business is sustainable. And coming back to the question of SUV, yes, it is top completely a high priority item for us. So, like I said, without committing to a timeline, I would also be very happy to do it as quickly as is possible. But as quickly as is possible doesn't mean in the foreseeable future, in this year or something, it's not happening.
Right. Great. Thanks for that. And actually, the note I want to end on is really on a positive note in these tough times. Is the fact that you've got fifth generation City, which obviously a lot is going to be riding on that, because the City has been the backbone of Honda. It's a profitable model. That's really the cash cow of the company, given its volumes and margins, balance. So clearly, wish you all the best with the new model. I mean, we are also excited. Can't wait to drive it. And I don't know, hopefully see you at the launch. That would really be maybe wishful thinking, but I think if things improve, I think the City launch could be. We'd love to be there physically as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So, and just to add before I close, so of course we were very much focused on the City because it's the product which has been synonymous with the name Honda in India. But having said that, I think you would have seen teasers of the new Jazz and the new WRV also that we are launching. The WRV
Right.
gets a more masculine front look with a bold grille and everything. So I'm sure customers. So we'll have three models, FMC, MMC put together, coming
Right.
up in the very near future. And I think customers will have a much greater choice and a sexier product to enjoy as we go along.
Yeah. Sorry,
And
Rajesh, you just remind me of one thing which I'm going to press you on, and actually I forgot, but you brought that up. Is the Jazz. Now,
mm,
the next generation one was shown in Japan last year. Clearly, it's not coming here, with the fact that if at this point you've invested in doing a kind of a small tweak on the current Jazz. Is that fair to assume?
so yeah, I cannot comment. Like I said, we will not comment on future product launches. Right now, we are focused on the facelift that we've done. I think it has become very, very attractive. Let the features, etc., get revealed. I'm sure the customers are going to get very excited. Let's look at the response of that, and basis that, when our revolution time comes in, I'm sure we'll have more to talk about the Jazz.
Okay, Rajesh, we leave it at that. It's been
Yeah.
wonderful talking to you. Nice to see you very relaxed, looking fresh, fit at home. Obviously, you've taken this lockdown well, and wishing you all the best, because it's going to be a very crucial year for the industry, and particularly for Honda with the new City and your new launches coming up. Wish you all the best and wish you all success. Thanks for talking
Yep.
to us.
Thank you very much, Hormuz. It was great pleasure talking to you. And once again, thank you to all your viewers, all our viewers. And I wish you and everybody to stay healthy, stay safe. And unprecedented times, please take good care of yourself and all your loved ones. Thank you very
Thank you.
much.